She is not your daughter. Evie, do not correct her. Richard's voice cut through the private dining room like a cold blade. He did not whisper. He said it loudly, his tone flat, heavy, and full of authority. Beneath the dark mahogany table, his hand clamped down over my wrist. His grip was not meant to bruise, but it was hard enough to freeze me in place. I felt the dull throb in my stiff finger joints under his heavy palm. Beside me, my 80-year-old mother, Helen, froze, her fork hovering inches above her plate. Across the table, my son Lucas stopped chewing, his jaw tight, his knuckles turning white around his glass. Chloe leaned back in her chair, a soft, triumphant smirk playing on her lips as she took a slow sip of her Cabernet. The heavy silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the distant clatter of silverware from the main kitchen outside. That was the exact second something inside me went completely still. Not broken, not angry, just cold, quiet, and still. But to understand how I ended up sitting at that table, handing my dignity over to a man I thought I loved, we have to go back to 3 weeks before that fateful night. The morning of my mother's birthday started in the quiet warmth of my kitchen in Carmel, Indiana. The sharp, clean scent of fresh pine cleaner mingled with the rich aroma of dark roast coffee. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting long amber stripes across the hardwood floor. At 58, my morning routine had become a slow, deliberate ritual. My lower back burned with the familiar dull ache of sciatica, and my fingers felt stiff from the crisp morning air. I pressed a heated pad behind my back, poured a mug of coffee, and set out my mother's medication organizer on the table. For 25 years, I had worked as the head pharmacist at a busy retail chain. My entire life was built on precision. I measured milligrams, double-checked drug interactions, and caught tiny clerical errors that could cost a patient their life. Numbers, labels, and records never lied to me. They were clear, logical, and safe. Yet, when it came to my personal life, I had allowed my own heart to cloud my vision. 12 years ago, my first husband, Paul, passed away after a long battle with illness. We had built a peaceful, solid life together during our 30 years of marriage. After he died, the silence in my house became a heavy, physical presence. The empty chairs at the dinner table, the quiet evenings without footsteps in the hallway. The loneliness felt like an endless winter. When I met Richard Vance 4 years ago, he felt like a warm spring thaw. He was a commercial real estate agent, charming, quick with compliments, and full of grand plans for the future. When he held my hand and talked about building a blended family, I wanted so desperately to believe him. I missed being loved. I missed having someone to care for. And in my hunger for that warmth, I slowly began using my savings, my credit, and my generosity to buy a sense of belonging. For 3 full weeks, I threw myself into organizing my mother's 80-story birthday dinner. I called the Oakwood Chop House twice to confirm that the private room had no steps, ensuring her walker could roll in smoothly. I requested a chair with firm, high back support and brought a small velvet cushion from home because I knew her newly replaced knee would stiffen if she sat too long. I wanted every detail to be perfect. I wanted my family to feel safe, cherished, and whole. The private room at the restaurant was elegant and warm. Soft yellow light glowed from the wall sconces, reflecting off the polished dark wood panels and crisp white tablecloths. My sister Carol had brought a fresh bouquet of pink roses, their sweet, floral fragrance filling the air. My son Lucas had driven over straight from his construction site, wearing the clean navy polo shirt he always kept in his truck for family gatherings. My mother sat at the head of the table, her thin hands resting on her lap, a quiet, happy smile softening her wrinkled face. Then came the disruption. Richard's 21-year-old daughter, Chloe, walked in 40 minutes late. The heavy wooden door swung open, and she swept into the room, her designer perfume overpowering the scent of the roses. She wore a cream-colored wool coat that I had paid for on my credit card last Christmas, and she carried a leather handbag that cost more than my first apartment's monthly rent. She gave my mother a brief, dismissive wave and tossed her coat over the back of a chair. "Sorry," Chloe said, pulling out her phone without looking at anyone. Parking was totally insane. It was a lie. I had looked out the window 10 minutes earlier. The parking lot was half empty. But I said nothing. I swallowed my annoyance and forced a gentle smile. In those days, I was trying so hard to be what people called a good stepmother. Chloe was a junior studying communications at the university. According to Richard, she had suffered deeply after her parents' divorce. I told myself that patience, generosity, and understanding were the price of blending a family. So, I had paid for things. At first, it was small. A monthly phone bill here, a dental copay there, a few $100s for textbooks. Then came sorority dues, car insurance, monthly living allowances, and the hefty lease payments on her new Jeep. "You're giving her a real chance at life," Evie, Richard used to whisper, kissing my forehead late at night. I loved hearing that. It made me feel useful. It made me feel like I was building a real home again. For the first 20 minutes, dinner moved along pleasantly. My mother shared a funny story from 1968 about getting pulled over while driving my father's old sedan without a license. Lucas teased her gently, and even Richard laughed loudly. Then, Lucas turned to Chloe and asked politely how her semester was going. Chloe didn't look up from her screen. She gave a dry, careless shrug. College is pretty easy when your dad marries a woman who loves spreadsheets and automatic bill payments. The laughter at the table died instantly. Lucas stopped smiling. Carol slowly lowered her glass of water. Richard gave a short, nervous laugh, the kind people use when they want everyone to pretend a cruel comment was just a harmless joke. I looked directly at Chloe. "What does that mean?" She shrugged again, her eyes fixed on her phone. "Nothing. I'm just saying you're organized." "That isn't what you said, Chloe." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, trying not to cause a scene on her own birthday. Seeing her distress made a knot of heat rise in my chest. Then, Chloe lifted her wine glass, her lips curling into a smug smile. "To Dad," she announced to the quiet room. He finally found a retirement plan with a great credit score. Nobody laughed. Outside the private room, the faint hum of restaurant chatter continued, but inside, the air felt ice cold. I carefully set my fork down on the white cloth. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady, "apologize." Her dark eyebrows shot up. "For what?" "For insulting me in front of my family on my mother's birthday." She turned her head and looked at her father. That was the moment Richard reached over and placed his heavy hand over my wrist, squeezing down just hard enough to stop me from moving, his words slicing through the room to put me in my place. At 5:30 the next morning, I woke to the sharp, burning ache in my lower back. The house was pitch black and freezing. The bitter winter wind rattled the glass panes in the kitchen window. I did not stay in bed. I pulled on a heavy wool cardigan, pressed a warm heating pad behind my back, and sat down at the wooden kitchen table with a steaming mug of black coffee. The rich, bitter aroma filled the silent room. I opened my laptop. The cold blue light from the screen illuminated my hands, which felt stiff and sore. For 25 years, my career as a head pharmacist had trained my mind to see details that others missed. In a pharmacy, a misplaced decimal point or a misread label could spell disaster. I was used to looking at long columns of data, cross-checking drug doses, and tracing paper trails. Numbers did not lie. They did not mask cruel insults behind nervous laughs, and they did not demand unconditional forgiveness. They were simple, cold, and factual. I pulled up 22 months of our joint and individual bank statements. I took out a clean yellow legal pad, a fresh blue pen, and began to line up every single transaction. As I scrolled through the records, my stomach tightened. The list was far worse than I had allowed myself to imagine. I had known about the regular expenses. I had willingly authorized those. There were the monthly sorority dues, the dental bills, the textbooks, the expensive phone plan, the insurance payments, and the recurring $900 monthly allowance for Chloe's personal living expenses. There was the heavy monthly lease payment for her brand new Jeep. Then my eyes caught something else. I spotted several large, recurring wire transfers labeled Northgate Education Reserve. Over 22 months, these transfers added up to nearly $32,000. But when I tracked the recipient account numbers, my pulse began to thud in my ears. The money had never touched Northgate University's bursar office. It had been routed directly into an operating account for Holloway Commercial Holdings, Richard's struggling real estate business. I stared at the screen. My hand hovered over the computer mouse. A wave of memories rushed over me. I remembered Richard sitting beside me on the anniversary of my first husband Paul's death, holding my hand in the dark. I remembered him bringing me a warm bowl of soup when my sciatica kept me pinned to the couch. I remembered how relieved I had felt to believe that I was loved again. Then I felt the phantom pressure of his heavy hand clamping down on my wrist at the dinner table. I heard his voice booming in front of my mother. "She is not your daughter. Don't correct her." The fog in my mind cleared completely. The sadness vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Richard had not just allowed his daughter to disrespect me. He had used my longing for a family, my generosity, and my grief to fund his failing business while letting his daughter treat me like an endless ATM. He had tricked me into paying for his past debts while stripping away my dignity. I did not scream. I did not throw my mug against the wall. I simply got to work. With quiet, steady fingers, I began my campaign of boundaries. I logged into my primary banking portal and redirected my entire pharmacist salary into a brand new private account at a different bank, one that Richard had no access to. I canceled the automatic wire transfers for Chloe's living allowance. I removed her name as an authorized user on my credit cards. I stopped the recurring auto draft for the Jeep lease. I did not touch her car, nor did I call her university. I simply stopped volunteering my hard-earned money to fuel their disrespect. At 7 a.m., the floorboards in the hallway creaked. Richard walked into the kitchen wearing his navy bathrobe, holding his phone in his hand. His face was red, and his brow was furrowed in confusion. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice raspy with sleep. "Chloe just called me from a gas station. My card bounced when I tried to pay for coffee, and her card was declined." I did not flinch. I slowly turned the laptop screen toward him and spread the printed bank statements across the wooden table. The black ink on the white paper was stark and clear. "I followed your boundary, Richard," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "She isn't my daughter. You are her father. So her bills are now entirely your responsibility." Richard's anger lasted less than 5 seconds. His eyes scanned the table and landed on the highlighted wire transfers marked Holloway Commercial Holdings. Instantly, the color drained from his face. His lips thinned into a pale line. I tapped my index finger against the paper, right over the $32,000 total. "Why did money meant for Chloe's tuition end up in your business account?" Richard lunged across the table, his hand shooting out to grab the printed statements. But I was faster. I swept the papers back toward my chest, out of his reach. In that quiet kitchen, as the morning sun finally broke through the gray clouds outside, I looked into my husband's eyes. I saw no love, no regret, and no warmth. I only saw the desperate panic of a man who realized his golden goose had just stepped out of the cage. After that morning in the kitchen, Richard did not yell anymore. Instead, a heavy, suffocating silence settled over our home. He moved his clothes into the guest bedroom, closing the door with a quiet, sharp click that echoed down the hallway. But the quiet was deceptive. In the days that followed, Richard launched a subtle, venomous campaign of weaponized silence and social sabotage. He began planting seeds of doubt wherever he went. I noticed it first when our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, stopped me near the mailboxes. He looked at me with a tilted head and pitying eyes, asking softly if I was feeling overwhelmed lately. Later, a longtime pharmacy client gently asked if I had considered stepping back from my long shifts to rest my mind. Richard was telling everyone the same crafted story. Evie is under tremendous stress. Her memory is slipping. She is getting confused. He was not just defending his greed. He was trying to destroy my professional reputation before I could expose his fraud. As a licensed head pharmacist, my entire career depended on mental sharpness. If people believed I was losing my memory, my words would mean nothing. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my office phone at the pharmacy rang. The caller ID displayed Brody's supply. It was Thomas Brody, a respected local business owner who had filled his heart prescriptions with me for 15 years. "Evie, we need to talk," Thomas said, his gravelly voice unusually heavy. "Richard called me yesterday. He said he was worried about you. He told me you were getting forgetful with pharmacy records and suggested I transfer my business elsewhere before things got complicated." My chest tightened, but I kept my breathing steady. "Thomas, you know my work." "I do," Thomas replied softly. "I remembered how my late wife suffered from dementia. I know what memory loss looks like, Evie, and you do not have it." He left the whole conversation on my voicemail. "I am sending you the audio file right now." That phone call was my turning point. The sadness and betrayal in my heart hardened into pure, unshakable resolve. I was done reacting. I was done feeling like a victim. It was time to take complete control of my life. My first action was immediate and medical. The very next morning, I walked into the cognitive neurology clinic at the University Medical Center. I spent 3 hours undergoing rigorous memory evaluations, verbal processing tests, and brain scans. 2 days later, I held an official, sealed report signed by the chief neurologist. Evie Miller possesses exceptional cognitive function, sharp recall, and 0 signs of neurological decline. I framed a copy for my desk and emailed another directly to the pharmacy corporate board. His lie was dead on arrival. My second action was legal and financial. I met with Nathan Kim, a sharp family law attorney with a quiet, intense demeanor. We reviewed 22 months of financial records. Nathan filed for legal separation, requested temporary financial restraints, and ordered a forensic audit of Richard's commercial real estate accounts. Then came the confrontation with Chloe. On Thursday afternoon, the bell above the pharmacy door chimed loudly. Chloe marched inside, her cheeks flushed red, her eyes flashing with anger. She slammed her designer handbag onto the glass counter, ignoring the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint smell of rubbing alcohol in the air. "My card was declined at the campus bookstore," she hissed, leaning over the counter. "You can't just cut me off without warning. I have tuition deadlines." I did not raise my voice. I did not step back. I looked her dead in the eye, pulled a manila folder from my desk, and slid 3 printed pages across the glass counter. "Look at the red highlights, Chloe," I said, my voice smooth and calm. She frowned, picking up the papers. They were wire transfer receipts. Each page clearly showed tens of thousands of dollars. money I had willingly set aside for her college tuition, being transferred directly into Richard's personal business account, Holloway Commercial Holdings. "Your father told you I was paying your tuition," I explained quietly. "I was. But he took that money and used it to pay off his own business debts. He used you as a shield to siphon my savings. You were never a priority to him, Chloe. You were just his excuse." Chloe stared at the black and white numbers. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The arrogance in her eyes vanished, replaced by a sudden, raw realization. For the first time in her life, she saw her father not as a protective hero, but as a manipulative con artist who had used both of us. He told me you agreed to this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never did," I replied gently. "You insulted me at dinner because you thought I was holding out on you. The truth is, your father was robbing us both." She stood frozen in the middle of the pharmacy aisle, holding the evidence in her shaking hands. She did not yell. She did not demand anything else. She simply turned and walked out into the gray rain. That evening, after closing the pharmacy, I stood alone in my office. The air smelled faintly of paper and lavender tea. I sorted my documents into neat, color-coded folders. Bank statements in blue, medical records in white, legal filings in red. My back still ached, but I no longer felt weak. I looked at my reflection in the dark window pane. The woman staring back was no longer a lonely widow desperate to be loved. She was a woman who had reclaimed her ground. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Grand Hotel in downtown Indianapolis was packed with 200 people. The air was thick with the rich scent of seared steak, roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and warm floral arrangements. Crystal chandeliers hung low from the high ceilings, casting a bright, dazzling light across the round tables covered in crisp white linen. Flashbulbs snapped near the stage as photographers moved through the crowd. This was the annual Commercial Real Estate Leadership Gala. Bankers, investors, local business owners, and city officials filled the room. Richard sat at table 1, right in front of the main stage. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that I had picked up from the dry cleaners 2 days ago. His golden hair was neatly combed, and he wore his most charming, confident smile. He looked every bit the successful, trustworthy businessman. But I knew the truth. Behind that polished smile was a man staring into a financial abyss, desperate to use this event to convince local lenders to refinance his failing developments. I sat beside him, wearing a classic black silk dress and the simple pearl earrings my first husband, Paul, had given me on our 20th anniversary. The cool pearls felt heavy against my earlobes, a grounding reminder of real love and quiet integrity. Richard leaned toward me, his breath warm against my neck, smelling faintly of red wine and mints. His hand closed over my fingers under the table, squeezing hard enough to leave a red mark. "Look happy, Evie," he whispered through gritted teeth, his smile never wavering for the cameras. "Everyone is watching us. Do not ruin this night with your dramatic moodiness. Just smile and let them see you stand behind me." I turned my head and looked directly into his eyes. My voice was ice cold. "I am not here to stand behind your lies, Richard." Before he could respond, the master of ceremonies stepped up to the podium. The microphone gave a brief, high-pitched squeal that echoed off the high walls. The room quieted down. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "Tonight, we honor excellence in commercial development. Before we present the Leadership Award to Mr. Richard Vance, we are honored to have his wife, Mrs. Evie Miller, a respected head pharmacist in our community, say a few words." Applause erupted across the room. Richard let go of my hand, giving me a short, tense nod. He expected me to play along. He believed my desire to avoid a public scene would force me to obey. He thought my silence could still be bought. I stood up. My back felt straight, my steps steady. The sharp click of my black heels echoed on the polished wooden floor as I walked up the side stairs to the stage. I adjusted the microphone. The bright stage lights blinded me for a second, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw the sea of familiar faces staring up at me. I saw bankers who had approved my pharmacy accounts, business owners I had served for decades, and neighbors who had listened to Richard's subtle lies about my health. I took a deep breath. The room fell completely silent. "Good evening," I began. My voice was clear, calm, and steady. It carried across the silent ballroom without shaking. Marriage is built on trust, transparency, and shared truth. For 2 years, many of you have assumed that because I stood beside Richard Vance, I endorsed his business practices and shared his financial vision. I paused, looking directly at table 1. Richard's smile had completely vanished. His jaw was clenched, his posture rigid. "I am standing here tonight to tell you that I no longer do," I continued, my words falling like heavy stones into the quiet room. "My husband publicly informed me that I have no parental role in his family. I accepted that boundary. I stopped paying his daughter's personal expenses from my private accounts. Shortly after, I discovered that over $30,000 I believed was funding her college education had been redirected into his commercial operating accounts." Gasps rippled through the front tables. Several bankers sat up straight, their eyes widening. Richard stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Evie, that is enough." Richard barked, stepping toward the stage, his face flushed dark red. I did not flinch. I held up one hand, my voice remaining firm and unwavering. "I also discovered an unauthorized request to alter one of my private investment accounts. That matter has been reported to law enforcement and remains under active investigation. I have filed for legal separation, requested a forensic audit of Holloway Commercial Holdings, and frozen all joint credit lines." The ballroom erupted into hushed, frantic whispering. People leaned across tables, exchanging shocked glances. "I came here tonight," I said, looking out at the crowd, "because my presence was being used as proof that everything in Richard's business and personal life was normal. It is not. I refuse to lend my name, my reputation, or my hard-earned credibility to a lie any longer." I stepped away from the microphone and began walking toward the stairs. Richard scrambled onto the stage, grabbing the microphone from the stand. His knuckles were white. He forced a strained, embarrassed laugh that sounded hollow in the large room. "I apologize, everyone," Richard called out, his voice desperate, echoing harshly through the speakers. "My wife has been under extreme emotional stress lately. As many of you know, she has been struggling with severe fatigue and memory issues. We have been trying to handle her cognitive decline. Privately—" "That is a lie," a loud, gravelly voice cut through the room. Every head turned. Thomas Brody stood up at table 4. He did not rush. He held his cane in one hand and his cell phone high in the other. "My name is Thomas Brody," he said, his voice ringing clearly across the ballroom. "I have trusted Evie Miller with my life-saving prescriptions for 15 years. My late wife died of Alzheimer's disease. I know what memory loss looks like, and Evie does not have it. But Richard Vance called my office on Tuesday and left a voicemail trying to convince me to pull my business from her pharmacy by claiming she was losing her mind." Thomas pressed play on his phone, holding it near a tabletop microphone. Richard's voice blared through the speakers, loud and undeniable. "Arthur, Evie is getting forgetful. You may want to transition your accounts before things get complicated." The recording lasted 15 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stood frozen on the stage, the color completely drained from his face. Before anyone could speak, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Chloe stepped into the room. She was not wearing her designer coat or carrying her expensive handbag. She wore a simple dark sweater and jeans. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. She walked down the center aisle, holding a thick white envelope. "Chloe, go wait in the car." Richard panicked, his voice cracking into the microphone. Chloe ignored him. She walked straight to the main table where the president of the Real Estate Association sat. She placed the envelope gently on the white tablecloth. "These are the bank statements and emails," Chloe said, her voice shaking slightly, but loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear clearly. "My father told me Evie agreed to pay off his business debts. He lied to me, he lied to school officials, and he used my tuition to cover his own losses. Evie never gave him permission. She tried to help us, and he robbed her." The room remained dead silent. No one cheered. No one shouted. The cold, brutal weight of the truth settled over the entire room. The president of the association stood up slowly. He looked at Richard with cold, disgusted eyes, then looked down at the documents in front of him. "In light of these disclosures," the president announced into the room, "the board is postponing tonight's leadership award indefinitely, pending a full internal review." Two major lenders at table 2 immediately stood up, buttoned their jackets, and walked out of the ballroom without looking at Richard. Other business owners quietly cleared their tables. Richard stood alone on the brightly lit stage, clutching a silent microphone as his reputation, his business, and his carefully constructed illusion crumbled into dust around him. I walked out of the Meridian Grand Hotel into the crisp night air. Lucas was waiting by the front entrance, holding my wool coat. I wrapped it tightly around my shoulders. The cool wind felt clean and refreshing against my face. For the first time in 2 years, I took a deep, full breath. My heart felt light. My mind was clear. I had not destroyed Richard. He had destroyed himself. I had simply stepped out of the way and let the truth speak. 11 months passed like a quiet, cleansing rain. The forensic audit conducted by the court revealed the full extent of Richard's financial collapse. Faced with undeniable banking records and civil discovery, he surrendered his claims to my estate and agreed to a structured settlement. His largest commercial development collapsed within 6 months. He was forced to sell his luxury Lexus, liquidate his remaining business assets, and move into a small, dark one-bedroom rental apartment on the outskirts of town. He no longer called me. The endless stream of charming promises, quiet threats, and manipulative excuses finally ceased. Chloe took a full semester away from Northgate University. She moved back in with her mother, enrolled in a campus work-study program, and took a part-time job behind the register at the university bookstore. She applied for standard federal student loans to cover her remaining tuition. True to her word, she signed a formal, interest-free repayment agreement for the personal charges she had made on my credit cards. Once a month, she met me at a quiet coffee shop near the park. Our conversations were no longer built on obligation or artificial family performance. At first, we spoke only of bank receipts, budget worksheets, and monthly payment schedules. But over time, the tension between us dissolved into a quiet, honest understanding. During one of our meetings in late spring, as the smell of fresh espresso filled the air, Chloe looked down at her hands, her nails short and unpolished. "I treated your kindness like proof that you were weak," she admitted softly, her voice steady and sincere. I smiled gently across the small wooden table. "No, Chloe, it was proof that I trusted the wrong person, but learning who to trust is part of growing up." She nodded, meeting my eyes with a newfound maturity. We did not pretend to be mother and daughter. We did not force a fairy tale reconciliation. Instead, We forged something far more durable: mutual respect between two independent, self-aware women. My own life underwent a quiet, radical transformation. The pharmacy corporate board recognized my unwavering integrity during the public crisis and promoted me to regional pharmacy director. My daily routine changed. I stopped working 60-hour weeks at the retail counter. I began attending weekly yoga classes to stretch my stiff joints, and the burning pain in my lower back gradually faded into a distant memory. My physical therapist remarked that my posture had improved dramatically once I stopped carrying the weight of everyone else's secrets. During the summer, Lucas took 2 weeks off from his construction company to help me restore my home. Together, we repainted the guest room and the living area in a soft, warm cream tone that caught the morning light. We replaced the old, creaking furnace that I had postponed repairing for years. We fixed the squeaky latch on the back gate. The house no longer felt like a place where I was hiding from loneliness. It felt like a sanctuary of my own making. By late October, Indiana's autumn had arrived in full color. The oak trees behind my house turned brilliant shades of amber, gold, and deep crimson. Crisp, cool air rustled the fallen leaves across the lawn, carrying the earthy fragrance of changing seasons. On a Saturday afternoon, during the golden hour before sunset, my back porch was bathed in a warm, honey-colored light. The world felt still and serene. My mother, Helen, sat comfortably in a new, high-backed armchair fitted with a plush velvet cushion. Her hands rested peacefully in her lap, a warm teacup balanced between her palms. Her knee no longer bothered her, and her eyes were bright as she watched the crimson leaves drift down from the trees. Near the garden bed, Lucas stood by the grill, the rich, smoky aroma of grilled chicken and herbs rising into the cool evening air. He laughed as he flipped a skewer, his cheerful voice echoing through the yard. A car pulled up quietly in the driveway. Chloe stepped out, wearing a simple cardigan and boots. She walked up the wooden porch steps, carrying a small paper envelope and a fresh bouquet of bright yellow daisy flowers. "Happy autumn, Evie," Chloe said softly, handing me the flowers. Inside the envelope was her monthly repayment check, neatly filled out in black ink. I placed the check in my pocket and set the daisies in a vase on the patio table next to my mother's tea. Chloe stayed for 20 minutes, chatting warmly with Lucas about his latest building project and asking my mother about her garden. There was no drama, no hidden tension, and no unspoken demands. Just 3 people sharing a peaceful moment in the golden sunlight. After Chloe left, I walked to the edge of the porch and leaned my elbows against the wooden railing. The cool autumn breeze brushed against my face, carrying the sweet scent of dry leaves and wood smoke. The setting sun cast long, radiant beams of orange and purple light across the horizon. I looked back at the path I had walked over the past 2 years. I thought about the painful silence after my first husband died, and how my fear of being alone had led me to open my doors to a man who saw my generosity as a weakness. I remembered the heavy weight of Richard's hand on my wrist at the dinner table, trying to force me into submission. I felt no lingering anger toward Richard. I felt no bitterness, no desire for revenge, and no regret. The pain had burned away, leaving behind a clear, unshakable truth. I used to believe that love required endless sacrifice, that staying quiet was the price of keeping a family together. I used to think that being alone was the worst fate that could befall a woman my age. But standing there in the amber glow of the setting sun, I knew the truth. The greatest loneliness is not living in a quiet house. It is losing yourself inside a relationship that demands your silence. Setting a boundary is not an act of hostility, and it is not a punishment for others. It is the highest form of self-love, a sacred declaration of your own dignity. I took a deep, clear breath of the cool autumn air. My hands were steady. My heart was full and untroubled. I was free, I was whole, and I was finally home within myself. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.